Her fingers trembled as she typed with her right hand, each letter a small agony. Mom, please. He broke my arm. I'm scared. He's getting worse. I don't know what to do. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, before the shame could stop her again like it had the last 3 times. The apartment walls seemed to close in around her as she sat on the bathroom floor, the lock she'd turned feeling as flimsy as paper against Derek's rage. The reply came faster than her mother ever responded to anything. Address. Now. Antonia's breath caught. Her mother had never been that direct, that commanding. She stared at the message, her broken arm throbbing in time with her pulse. Maybe her mom was angrier than she'd expected. Maybe she was finally done with Antonia's excuses, done with hearing about Derek's bad days and stress from work. With shaking fingers, she typed, 1247 Ashwood Street, apartment 4B. But Mom, don't come. He's drunken. 20 minutes. 2 words. Cold. Final. Not like her mother at all. Antonia's stomach twisted into knots. She looked at the message thread, scrolling up to double-check the contact name. Mom stared back at her in bold letters. But something felt wrong. The profile picture was blank, just a grey silhouette. When had her mom changed that? She'd always had that photo of the garden, the one with the hydrangeas. Her hand went cold. With dread pooling in her gut, she tapped the number at the top of the screen. Her eyes widened as she read the digits. The last 4 numbers were 4782. Her mother's number ended in 4728. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She'd messaged a complete stranger. Told them she was hurt, alone, scared. Given them her exact address. And they were coming. Antonia's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Serial killers trolled for vulnerable victims. Human traffickers preyed on women in crisis. She'd just painted a target on her back and sent out an engraved invitation. She tried to type another message, to tell them it was a mistake, to beg them not to come. But her fingers froze over the keyboard when Derek's voice boomed from downstairs. Antonia. Get down here. Now. The bathroom door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. His fist, probably, or maybe his shoulder. The wood around the lock frame groaned. I said now. She looked at her phone, then at the door. 2 threats. One she knew, one she didn't. Derek would break through that door eventually, he always did. And when he did, her broken arm would be the least of her problems. She could see it in his eyes tonight, that edge he got when he'd passed from angry drunk to dangerous drunk. The edge that said he might not stop this time. But the stranger. 20 minutes, they'd said. What kind of person responds to a cry for help from a wrong number like that? What kind of person says they're coming without asking questions, without hesitation? Her phone buzzed again. Lock yourself somewhere safe. Don't open the door for anyone but me. I'll knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. Antonia's heart hammered against her ribs. The message was protective, almost caring? But that made no sense. She stared at the words, trying to find the trap, the danger hidden in them. Another slam against the door. This time, a crack appeared in the wood near the hinges. You think you can lock me out? This is MY apartment. Your MY girlfriend. His girlfriend. The word used to mean something beautiful. Now it felt like a chain around her neck, getting tighter every day. She typed back with one hand, who are you? The response was immediate, someone who doesn't let men hurt women. 18 minutes. Across the city, Vincenzo Corleone sat in the back of his black Mercedes, watching the city lights blur past as his driver navigated through traffic at speeds that would make most people pray. But Vincenzo hadn't prayed in years. Prayer was for people who believed in mercy, and mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford in his line of work. He looked down at his phone again, reading the message that had come through to his private number, the number only 5 people in the world possessed. The message that should have been impossible. Mom, please. He broke my arm. I'm scared. He's getting worse. I don't know what to do. Vincenzo had built his empire on reading situations quickly, on understanding the angles before anyone else saw them. This was a wrong number, that much was obvious. Some terrified woman had transposed 2 digits and accidentally sent her plea for help to one of the most dangerous men in the city. The smart move was to ignore it. Delete it. Pretend he'd never seen it. But Vincenzo had seen too many women broken by men who thought their fists made them powerful. He'd watched his own mother fade away under his father's brutality, her light dimming day by day until there was nothing left but a hollow shell that went through the motions of living. He'd been 12 when she finally stopped moving altogether. "Drive faster," he told his driver, a man named Paolo who'd been with him for 15 years and knew better than to ask questions. His lieutenant, Dante, sat beside him in the passenger seat, already pulling up the address on his tablet. Ashwood Street. That's in the Riverside district. Working-class neighborhood. I'll have a team there in. No team, Vincenzo said quietly. Just us. Dante turned to look at him, confusion clear in his weathered face. Boss, we don't know what we're walking into. Could be a setup, could be. It's not a setup. Vincenzo's voice carried the absolute certainty that had made him a legend in the underworld. Someone made a mistake, and that mistake is going to save her life tonight. He thought about sending another message, something to explain who he was, but what could he possibly say? Don't worry, you accidentally messaged the head of the Corleone crime family, but I'm one of the good guys? That would send her running straight to the police, if she could run. Her arm was broken. She was locked in a bathroom. And some piece of trash was trying to break down the door. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. 15 minutes now. His phone buzzed with her question, "Who are you?" He typed back the only truth that mattered, "Someone who doesn't let men hurt women." 18 minutes. Dante was still staring at him. "Boss, with all respect, we have 3 territorial disputes pending, the Russians are pushing into the docks, and we have that meeting with the Bratva tomorrow night. We don't have time to." "We make time," Vincenzo said softly. When he spoke quietly like that, people who knew him understood it was more dangerous than shouting. "Because if we don't, who will?" Antonia pressed her back against the bathroom wall, her broken arm sending lightning bolts of pain through her shoulder with every breath. The crack in the door was wider now, splinters of wood scattered across the tile floor. Derek had stopped pounding, which somehow felt more terrifying than the noise. The silence meant he was thinking, planning. She looked at her phone again, reading the stranger's messages over and over. "Someone who doesn't let men hurt women." The words felt like a lifeline thrown into drowning waters, but she couldn't see who was holding the other end. Couldn't know if they were pulling her towards safety or dragging her into deeper danger. But as another crack split through the door, as Derek's shadow appeared in the gap, his eye pressed to the opening with a rage that made her blood freeze, Antonia realized something fundamental. She was already in the deepest danger. And in 18 minutes, no, 16 now, she would find out if wrong numbers could be right in all the ways that mattered. The question wasn't whether the stranger was dangerous. The question was whether he was dangerous to the right person. Antonia Reyes Bradford, she'd kept her mother's maiden name even after Derek had pressured her to drop it completely, had always been the girl who saw the best in people. Her therapist once told her it was both her greatest strength and her most dangerous flaw. Right now, huddled on the cold bathroom floor with her arms swelling to twice its normal size, she was inclined to agree with the dangerous flaw part. She thought about the woman she used to be 3 years ago. The one who wore bright yellow sundresses and laughed so loudly in coffee shops that strangers would smile. The one who taught art to elementary school kids and believed that everyone deserved a second chance. That Antonia had seen Derek Hutcheson at a gallery opening, tall, charming, with a smile that could melt glacier, and thought she'd found someone who appreciated beauty the way she did. The first red flag came 2 months in, when he'd accidentally broken her phone during an argument about her male teaching assistant. She'd believed him when he said he was just scared of losing her, that his ex had cheated and he had trust issues. She'd even felt guilty for making him worry. The second flag came when he isolated her from her friends, one by one. Sarah was too flirty with him. Jessica was a bad influence. Matthew, was clearly into her and disrespecting their relationship. By the time Antonia realized she was alone, the cage had already locked. Tonight's violence wasn't new. It was just the worst it had been yet. "I can see you through the crack, baby." Derek's voice oozed through the splintered door, sickeningly sweet now. This was his pattern, rage, then charm, then rage again. "Come on out. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean it. You just make me so crazy when you talk about leaving. You know I love you." Love. That word had become a weapon in his mouth. Antonia's right hand, the good one, touched the small scar above her eyebrow, the one from 6 months ago when he'd shoved her into the kitchen counter. She'd told the ER doctor she'd slipped. She'd told her mother she was clumsy. She'd told herself it was the last time. But here she was. Her phone buzzed. 12 minutes. Stay quiet. I need you to answer a question. Can you walk? The stranger's messages were so direct, so competent. Like someone who dealt with crises the way other people dealt with grocery shopping. It should have scared her more than it did. She typed back, yes. Arm is broken but I can move. Who are you? Someone who keeps promises. When I knock, you'll have 3 seconds to get to the door before he realizes what's happening. Can you do that? 3 seconds. From the bathroom floor to the front door. With a broken arm and Derek somewhere between her and freedom. She looked at the bathroom window, too small to crawl through, and they were on the 4th floor anyway. The door was her only exit, and Derek was on the other side of it. I don't know, she typed honestly. He's right outside. Then I'll make sure he's not. Trust me. Trust. Another word that had lost its meaning over the past 3 years. But what choice did she have? Vincenzo watched the city streets narrow as they entered the Riverside district. He knew these streets, had run them as a kid before his father died and left him an empire built on blood and loyalty. This was the neighborhood where people worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford to escape. Where domestic violence calls rarely got prioritized because the police were stretched too thin and the victims rarely pressed charges. His mother had lived in a neighborhood like this. Had died in one too. 10 minutes out, Paolo announced from the driver's seat. Dante was still trying to talk sense into him. Boss, I pulled up the apartment records. Derek Hutcherson, 32, works in commercial real estate. No arrest record, but 3 previous addresses with restraining orders filed against him, all dropped before they went to court. This guy's smart. He knows how to work the system. Not anymore, Vincenzo said simply. He thought about the woman, Antonia, he'd learned from a quick search of the address records. Antonia Reyes Bradford, 28, elementary art teacher at Riverside Charter School. In her faculty photo, she had kind eyes and a smile that looked genuine. The kind of smile that didn't exist on his side of the city, where everyone's expressions were calculated for advantage. He wondered if she still smiled like that, or if Derek Hutcherson had beaten it out of her. Vincenzo had built his reputation on being ruthless when needed and fair when possible. He didn't start wars, but he always finished them. He didn't hurt civilians, and he sure as hell didn't tolerate anyone in his organization disrespecting women. 3 years ago, he'd made an example of one of his own captains who'd put hands on his girlfriend. The man had survived, but he'd never walk quite right again. The message from Antonia had triggered something primal in him, something that went beyond logic or strategy. It reminded him of the night he'd found his mother on the kitchen floor, of the helplessness he'd felt at 12 years old, of the vow he'd made over her body that he would never be powerless again. And he'd never let anyone else be powerless if he could help it. What's the play when we get there? Dante asked, resignation in his voice. He'd learned years ago that when Vincenzo made up his mind, moving him was like trying to redirect a freight train with a feather. Simple. We knock. He opens. We educate him on proper behavior. And if he doesn't open? Vincenzo's smile was cold. Then we educate him on the importance of doors. Either way, he learns. His phone buzzed with Antonia's question, who are you? How did he answer that? He was Vincenzo Corleone, the man who controlled half the city's underground operations. The man politicians called when they needed problems to disappear. The man whose name made grown killers nervous. But tonight, in this moment, none of that mattered. Tonight, he was just someone who answered a wrong number because the right thing to do was obvious. In the bathroom, Antonia made a decision. Maybe it was the pain making her delirious, or maybe it was 3 years of fear finally crystallizing into something harder. Something that refused to spend another night wondering if she'd wake up at all. She looked at her broken arm, at the unnatural angle that made her dizzy. Derek had done this. Not stress, not alcohol, not her fault for mentioning she'd been talking to a divorce lawyer. Derek had grabbed her, and when she tried to pull away, he'd shoved her down the stairs with enough force to break bone. And he'd do it again. Tomorrow, next week, next month. He'd do it until something worse than a broken arm happened, until she became another statistic, Another woman who should have left sooner, according to people who'd never felt the suffocating weight of fear and shame. The stranger, whoever he was offering her a chance. Maybe her only chance. She typed, "Okay. I trust you. Please hurry." The response was immediate, 8 minutes. "I've never broken a promise to a woman in my life. I won't start with you." Something in those words felt true in a way Derek's "I love yous" had stopped feeling years ago. "Antonia, seriously, this is getting old." Derek's voice had shifted from sweet to irritated. "I need to take you to the hospital. That arm looks bad, baby. Let me help you." Help. He'd broken it and now wanted credit for fixing it. She heard him walk away from the door, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. Maybe he was getting a drink. Maybe he was getting a tool to break the lock. She didn't know, and the not knowing was its own special torture. Her phone buzzed again. "I need to know something, Antonia. Do you want him arrested or do you want him handled differently?" She stared at the message, her breath catching. There was a weight to that question, an implication that made her pulse quicken. What did handled differently mean? Before she could respond, another message appeared. "I won't kill him unless you need me to. But I can make sure he never touches another woman. Your choice." No judgment either way. Antonia's hands shook as she read the words. This stranger, this person racing through the city to help her, was giving her power. Real power. The kind Derek had stripped away piece by piece over 3 years. She thought about the other women. The restraining orders Dante had mentioned. The pattern that would continue with the next girlfriend, and the one after that, until Derek either ended up in prison or ended someone's life. Her fingers moved across the screen. "I just want to be safe. I want him to never hurt anyone again. But I don't want blood on my hands." "You won't have blood on your hands. You have my word." 6 minutes. Outside the bathroom, she heard Derek's footsteps returning, heard the clink of metal. He was coming back with something. A screwdriver, probably, to pop the lock. "Last chance to come out on your own, Antonia," he called, and the threat was clear in his voice. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." She looked at her phone, at the countdown that couldn't move fast enough, and whispered to no one, "Please hurry." Vincenzo's Mercedes turned onto Ashwood Street, the tires barely making a sound on the wet pavement. It had started to rain, light drops that caught the streetlights and turned them into scattered diamonds. He'd always found rain cleansing, appropriate for nights when justice needed serving. "Buildings up ahead, boss," Paolo said. "Corner unit, 4th floor. Fire escape on the north side." Vincenzo scanned the building as they approached. Old brick, probably built in the 70s, with the kind of worn charm that meant barely maintained by a landlord who doesn't live here. Lights were on in maybe half the apartments. Working people, already asleep before their early shifts. Apartment 4B's lights were blazing. "Park 2 buildings down," Vincenzo instructed. "Engine running. Dante, you're with me." They exited the vehicle in synchronized silence, 2 men who'd done this dance 100 times in 100 different contexts. Vincenzo wore a black suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, but he moved like a shadow, like violence wrapped in expensive Italian wool. As they approached the building's entrance, his phone buzzed with Antonia's response. "I just want to be safe. I want him to never hurt anyone again. But I don't want blood on my hands." Vincenzo smiled grimly. She was kind even now, even broken and terrified. That kindness would have gotten her killed eventually, staying with a man like Derek. But tonight, her kindness would be protected by someone who had no kindness left to give men like Derek Hutchison. "You won't have blood on your hands. You have my word." 6 minutes, he sent back. The building's security door was a joke. Dante had it open in 5 seconds with a small tool Vincenzo didn't ask questions about. They climbed the stairs quickly, their footsteps silent on the worn carpet. Vincenzo had learned to move quietly in his father's house, where loud footsteps brought attention and attention brought pain. 4th floor. The hallway smelled like old cooking grease and someone's attempt to cover it with cheap air freshener. 3 doors down on the left, 4B. From inside, Vincenzo heard a man's voice. "Antonia. I'm getting real tired of this game." Then the sound of splintering wood. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. He typed quickly, "I'm outside your door. 30 seconds. When you hear me knock, you count to 3 and run for the door. Don't look back." He pocketed his phone and looked at Dante, who nodded once. They'd done this before, not exactly this, but close enough. The dance of violence they both knew by heart. Vincenzo raised his fist and knocked on the door. 3 times, pause, twice more. The pattern he'd promised. Inside, everything went silent. Antonia heard the knock, 3, pause, 2, and her entire world narrowed to a single point of focus. The door. 20 feet away. Derek between her and freedom. She heard Derek's confused voice, "Who the hell?" She didn't wait. Using the wall for support, Antonia pushed herself up, her broken arm screaming in protest. The bathroom door's lock had already given way to Derek's screwdriver. He'd been seconds from entering when the knock came. "Stay there," Derek commanded, moving toward the front door instead. "I'll handle this." But Antonia was already moving, adrenaline drowning out the pain. She burst from the bathroom into the short hallway, saw Derek's back at the front door, his hand on the knob. "Who is it?" Derek called through the door. The response was calm, cold, and absolutely certain. "Someone who received a very interesting message tonight." Antonia watched Derek's entire body stiffen. She ran. Derek's hand froze on the doorknob, his face draining of color as the meaning of those words sank in. "What message?" "I don't know what you're—" He never finished the sentence. Antonia sprinted past him with everything she had, her broken arm clutched against her chest, her bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor. She didn't think, didn't plan, just moved with the desperate energy of a trapped animal that finally saw daylight. "Antonia, no." Derek spun, reaching for her with those hands that had broken her, but she was already at the door, her good hand twisting the deadbolt, yanking it open. And there he stood. Vincenzo Corleone was not what Antonia had expected, though she couldn't have said what she'd been expecting. He was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from marble by an artist who understood that beauty and danger weren't opposites. He wore a black suit that fit him like a second skin, and his eyes, God, his eyes were the darkest brown she'd ever seen, almost black in the hallway's dim lighting. Those eyes swept over her in less than a second, taking in her tear-stained face, her cradled arm, the bruise already forming on her cheekbone that she hadn't even noticed yet. Something lethal flickered in his expression. "Inside," he said quietly, stepping forward. But he wasn't talking to her. He was looking past her at Derek, and the look on his face made Antonia's blood run cold, not because she feared him, but because she recognized the absolute certainty of violence in his eyes. This was a man who knew how to hurt people, and more importantly, knew when it was necessary. Behind Vincenzo stood another man, older, built like a wall, with silver threading through his dark hair. He stepped smoothly around his boss and took Antonia gently by her good arm. "Come," he said in a heavily accented voice, Italian, maybe. "Let's get you away from the door, Piccola. You're safe now." "Wait, who are—" Antonia started, but Vincenzo was already moving into the apartment, and Derek was backing up, his bravado crumbling. "Look, I don't know who you are or what she told you, but this is a domestic situation," Derek said, his voice taking on that smooth, reasonable tone he used when talking to cops or neighbors. "This is between me and my girlfriend. You need to leave before I call the police." Vincenzo smiled. It was the most terrifying smile Antonia had ever seen, not cruel, exactly, but absolutely devoid of mercy. "Please do," Vincenzo said softly, pulling his phone from his pocket and offering it to Derek. "I'd love to hear you explain to the police why your girlfriend has a broken arm and why she was locked in your bathroom, terrified for her life. Go ahead. I'll wait." Derek's face flushed red. "She fell down the stairs. It was an accident. She's clumsy, she's always." "She messaged her mother saying he broke my arm," Vincenzo interrupted, his voice never rising above conversational volume, which somehow made it more menacing. "Messaged her mother begging for help. Do you know what message her mother received tonight, Derek?" Derek swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. That's not." "Nothing," Vincenzo continued, taking another step forward. Derek took 2 steps back. "Her mother received nothing. Because Antonia made a mistake. She transposed 2 numbers. And instead of reaching her mother, she reached me." "So you're nobody," Derek said, trying to regain his footing. "You have no business being here." "Antonia," Tell him. Tell him to leave. For 3 years, Antonia had done what Derek told her to do. Had swallowed her words, dimmed her light, made herself smaller and smaller until she barely recognized her own reflection. For 3 years, she'd been terrified of what would happen if she defied him. She looked at Derek now, really looked at him. Saw him for what he was without the fog of fear and misplaced love clouding her vision. He was just a man. A weak, pathetic man who needed to hurt women to feel powerful. No, she said quietly. The word felt like revolution. Derek's eyes widened. What did you say? I said no. Her voice was stronger now, steadier. I want you to leave, Derek. This is over. This is my apartment. Derek exploded, his face turning purple. My name is on the lease. You don't get to kick me out. Actually, the older man, Dante, Antonia would learn later, said from where he stood beside her, the lease is in both your names. I checked on the way over. Which means the lady has every right to be here. You, on the other hand, just committed felony assault. I didn't, it was an accident. I have the message, Vincenzo said, pulling out his phone and turning the screen toward Derek. Time-stamped. He broke my arm. I'm scared. He's getting worse. Those are her words, sent 30 minutes ago. I have her address, which she gave freely because she was terrified. I have photographs I can take right now of her injuries. And I have something else, Derek. Vincenzo stepped closer, and Derek stumbled backward over the coffee table, landing hard on the couch. I have the will to make this very, very difficult for you, Vincenzo continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. See, I'm the kind of person who doesn't like men who hurt women. I'm the kind of person who has resources you can't imagine and patience you couldn't comprehend. So here's what's going to happen. He leaned down, getting close to Derek's face, and Antonia saw Derek actually whimper. You're going to pack a bag, one bag, and you're going to leave. You're never going to contact Antonia again. No calls, no texts, no emails, no showing up at her work or her mother's house or anywhere else she might be. You're going to disappear from her life completely. And if you ever, touch another woman the way you touched her, I'm going to hear about it. And when I hear about it, I'm going to come back. And next time, we're not going to have a conversation. You can't threaten me, Derek said, but his voice was shaking. I'll call the cops. I'll tell them you broke into my home and I'll show them the messages, Vincenzo said calmly. And Dante here will testify that we responded to a distress call. And then I'll have my lawyers, very expensive lawyers who've never lost a case, bury you in so much legal trouble that you'll wish prison was your only problem. He straightened up, adjusting his cuffs with casual precision. Or, Vincenzo continued, you can pack your bag and walk out of here. You can start over somewhere else, maybe think about the kind of man you want to be. Maybe get some help for whatever broken thing inside you makes you hurt people you claim to love. That's option 2. And if I refuse? Derek's voice was barely a whisper. Vincenzo's smile returned, cold and sharp as a knife. Then we moved to option 3, and you really don't want option 3. Trust me on that. The silence that followed was absolute. Antonia could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Dante's steady presence beside her like an anchor. She watched Derek's face cycle through emotions, rage, fear, calculation, and finally, defeat. Fine, Derek spat, pushing himself up from the couch. Fine. But this isn't over, Antonia. You think you can just... It is over, Vincenzo said, and the finality in his voice was like a door slamming shut. Right now, in this moment, it ends. You have 10 minutes to pack. Dante will accompany you to make sure you only take what's yours. And then you leave, and you never come back. Derek looked at Antonia one last time, and she saw something ugly in his expression. Not love, maybe never love. Just possession. Just anger at losing something he considered his property. You'll regret this, he said. But Antonia realized, with startling clarity, that the only thing she regretted was not leaving sooner. 15 minutes later, Derek was gone. His bag packed, his keys on the counter, his presence scrubbed from the apartment like a stain finally cleaned. Dante had escorted him down to the street and made sure he got in his car and drove away, leaving Antonia alone in the apartment with Vincenzo. The silence felt strange. For 3 years, this apartment had been filled with tension, with Derek's moods and demands and the constant low-level fear that colored everything. Now it was just quiet. Antonia stood in the middle of her living room, cradling her broken arm, and suddenly the adrenaline that had been keeping her upright drained away all at once. Her knees buckled. Vincenzo caught her before she hit the floor, his arms surprisingly gentle as he guided her to the couch. "Easy," he said softly. "You're in shock. That's normal. Just breathe." "I need to." Antonia's thoughts were fragmenting, scattering like dropped glass. "The hospital. My arm. I need to." "I know. Dante's bringing the car around. We'll take you." Vincenzo crouched down in front of her, those dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that should have been frightening but somehow wasn't. "But first, I need to ask you something important. Do you have somewhere safe to go? Family? Friends?" Antonia thought about her mother, living 3 hours away in Richmond. Thought about Sarah and Jessica, the friends she'd lost touch with because Derek had made it impossible to maintain those relationships. Thought about the life she'd had before Derek, before fear became her constant companion. "My mom," she whispered. "I could go to my mom's." "Good. That's good." Vincenzo pulled out his phone. "What's her real number?" Antonia told him, watching as he typed something quickly. "What are you doing?" "Letting her know you're safe and that you'll be calling her soon. She doesn't need to spend the night worrying." Something in Antonia's chest cracked open at this stranger, this dangerous man who'd appeared in her life like a dark angel, thinking about her mother's peace of mind. "Who are you?" she asked again, the question she'd been asking all night. "Really?" Vincenzo was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was trying to decide how much truth she could handle. "My name is Vincenzo Corleone," he said finally. "And I'm someone who believes that wrong numbers can sometimes be exactly right." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not. But it's the only one I can give you right now." He stood, offering her his hand. "Can you walk? We need to get that arm looked at." Antonia took his hand, his palm was warm, his grip steady, and let him help her up. As she stood, she swayed slightly, and Vincenzo's other hand came to her waist, steadying her with a touch that was completely impersonal and yet somehow made her feel safer than she'd felt in years. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come. If I hadn't sent that message to the wrong number." "The right number," Vincenzo corrected quietly. "Tonight, it was exactly the right number." Their eyes met, and something passed between them in that moment, something Antonia couldn't name but felt in her bones. Recognition, maybe. Or connection. Or just the strange intimacy that comes from being saved by a stranger who had no reason to save you except that he chose to. A car horn honked outside, Dante, signaling he was ready. "Come on," Vincenzo said, his hand still at her waist, guiding her toward the door. "Let's get you fixed up. And then we'll figure out what comes next." As they left the apartment, as Antonia walked away from 3 years of fear and pain, she realized she was still holding Vincenzo's hand. And she realized she didn't want to let go. The Mercedes was warm inside, leather seats soft beneath her as Vincenzo helped her settle in the back. He slid in beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, while Dante drove. As they pulled away from Ashwood Street, Antonia looked back at the building one last time. The window of apartment 4B was dark now, empty. Like a chapter of her life had been closed with finality. She turned to look at Vincenzo, at this man who'd answered her accidental cry for help like it was a sacred summons. In the passing streetlights, his profile was all sharp angles and shadows, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. "Why did you come?" she asked quietly. "Really? You could have ignored the message. You could have called the police for me. But you came yourself. Why?" Vincenzo didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, Antonia thought he wouldn't answer at all. "Then, because when I was 12 years old, my mother sent messages too. Not by text, we didn't have that then. But she called for help in every way she knew how. And nobody came. Nobody ever came." The pain in his voice was old and deep, a wound that had scarred over but never quite healed. "So when I saw your message," he continued, "I thought about her. And I thought about all the women who call for help into the void and hear nothing back. And I decided that tonight, someone would answer. Tonight, someone would come. Antonia felt tears sliding down her cheeks, not from pain or fear this time, but from something else. Something that felt like grief and gratitude tangled together. "I'm sorry about your mother," she whispered. "So am I," Vincenzo said. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "But maybe she sent me to you tonight. Maybe that wrong number wasn't an accident at all." And as the city lights blurred past and the hospital drew closer, Antonia found herself believing that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe fate didn't make mistakes. Maybe it just had a sense of humor about phone numbers. The hospital was nearly empty at midnight, just the night shift nurses and a handful of people in the waiting room who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Antonia sat in an examination room, her arm finally set and wrapped in a cast that went from her wrist to just below her elbow. The doctor, a tired woman in her 50s, had asked the standard questions about how it happened, and Antonia had told the truth for the first time in 3 years. "He pushed me down the stairs." The doctor's expression had hardened, and she'd documented everything carefully, taking photographs, noting the bruises Antonia hadn't even realized were there. Evidence, she'd called it. In case Antonia wanted to press charges. Did she? Antonia wasn't sure yet. Right now, she just wanted Derek gone, wanted to never think about him again. Vincenzo had stayed in the waiting room, respecting her privacy but close enough if she needed him. When she emerged with her prescription for pain medication and a follow-up appointment card, he was there immediately, rising from his chair with fluid grace. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I got pushed down a flight of stairs," Antonia said, then surprised herself by laughing, a short, slightly hysterical sound. "Sorry. That wasn't funny." "Yes, it was," Vincenzo said, a small smile touching his lips. "Humor helps. Means you're still fighting." They walked out to the car together, and Antonia realized it was almost 1 in the morning. She'd been awake for nearly 20 hours, running on adrenaline and fear, and now exhaustion was crashing over her like a wave. "Where do you want to go?" Vincenzo asked as Dante started the engine. "Your mother's house? A hotel? Back to the apartment." Antonia thought about the apartment, empty now, Derek free, but still haunted by 3 years of memories she'd rather forget. Thought about her mother's house, 3 hours away, arriving in the middle of the night to explanations and tears and questions she didn't have the energy to answer yet. "I don't know," she admitted. I don't know." Vincenzo was quiet for a moment, then made a decision. "I have a property. A safe house, we call it. Clean, secure, fully furnished. You can stay there tonight. Dante's wife Maria will be there to help you with anything you need. Tomorrow, in daylight, when you've rested, you can decide what comes next." "A safe house?" Antonia repeated. The phrase conjured images from movies: witness protection, criminals, dangerous secrets. "What exactly do you do, Vincenzo?" His dark eyes met hers in the dim car. "Things that keep people safe. Sometimes from others. Sometimes from themselves." It wasn't an answer, not really. But Antonia was too tired to push, and some part of her, the part that had seen Derek crumble under Vincenzo's quiet authority, suspected she already knew the answer anyway. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." The safe house was in a neighborhood Antonia recognized as expensive, tree-lined streets, houses set back from the road, the kind of quiet that money bought. Vincenzo's property was a 2-story townhouse with a security gate and cameras that tracked their approach. Inside, it was warm and tastefully furnished in neutral colors. Maria, a round woman in her 60s with kind eyes and an accent even thicker than Dante's, was waiting with tea and sandwiches despite the late hour. "Povera ragazza," she murmured, taking in Antonia's cast and pale face. Come. You eat something, then sleep. Everything else can wait." Antonia managed half a sandwich before Maria led her upstairs to a bedroom that looked like it had been pulled from a magazine: soft gray walls, white linens, a bathroom stocked with everything she could possibly need. "Mr. Corleone says you stay as long as you want," Maria said, helping Antonia out of her torn, blood-stained shirt and into clean pajamas that appeared from somewhere. "You need anything at all, you call. Phone is by the bed. I'm downstairs. When Maria left, Antonia sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The fear, the relief, the strange disorientation of having her entire life upended in the span of a few hours. She should call her mother. She should think about tomorrow, about work, about what came next. Instead, she lay down on sheets that smelled like lavender and let exhaustion pull her under. Downstairs, Vincenzo stood at the window, watching the street with the eternal vigilance of someone who'd learned early that safety was an illusion maintained through constant attention. She'll be okay, Dante said from behind him. Maria will take care of her. I know. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. But she shouldn't have needed taking care of in the first place. 3 years, Dante. 3 years of that bastard hurting her, and nobody stopped it. You stopped it tonight. Tonight. But what about all the nights before? Vincenzo turned from the window, frustration evident in every line of his body. What about the next woman Derek Hutcherson decides to hurt? What about all the other Derek Hutchersons out there? Dante studied his boss with the knowing look of someone who'd watched Vincenzo grow from an angry boy into a controlled but still dangerous man. You can't save them all, boss. No, Vincenzo agreed quietly. But I can save this one. He thought about Antonia's face when she'd opened that door, terrified, broken, but still fighting. Thought about how she'd looked at him in the car, asking questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Thought about the way her hand had felt in his, small and fragile and trusting in a way that made his chest tighten. He barely knew her. She barely knew him. But something had happened tonight, something that went beyond just answering a wrong number. Some connection had formed in crisis, forged in the space between danger and rescue. Vincenzo didn't believe in fate. Didn't believe in accidents or divine intervention. He believed in power, in choice, in the decisions people made when faced with impossible situations. But maybe, just maybe, he believed in wrong numbers that turned out right. Get some rest, he told Dante. Tomorrow we make sure Derek Hutcherson keeps his distance. I want eyes on him, discreet but constant. If he so much as thinks about coming near her again. I'll handle it, Dante assured him. Go home, boss. You've done enough for one night. But as Vincenzo left the safe house and climbed into the back of his Mercedes, he found himself looking back at the upstairs window where Antonia slept. Found himself wondering what tomorrow would bring, what choices she'd make, what role, if any, he'd play in her life after tonight. He'd saved her. That should be enough. So why did it feel like the beginning of something instead of the end? 3 days passed. 3 days of Antonia staying at the safe house, healing, thinking, trying to piece together who she was without Derek's shadow looming over her. Maria fed her, fussed over her, told her stories about Dante and their 3 grown children. The pain medication made everything soft around the edges, made sleep come easier than it had in years. Vincenzo came by each evening, ostensibly to check on the property, but really, Antonia suspected, to check on her. They'd talk for an hour, sometimes 2. He'd ask how she was feeling, if she needed anything, if she'd spoken to her mother yet. She had, finally, a tearful conversation that ended with promises to visit soon. But they also talked about other things. Books, music, art, Antonia's passion that Derek had tried to dim. Vincenzo knew more about Renaissance painting than she would have expected, could discuss Caravaggio's use of light with genuine insight. My mother loved art, he'd explained on the second night, sitting across from her in the living room with coffee neither of them was drinking. She used to take me to museums when I was young. Said beauty was important, especially when the world was ugly. Was your world ugly? Antonia asked softly. Yes, Vincenzo said simply. But she tried to make it beautiful anyway. There were things he didn't talk about, his business, his life outside these evening visits, the reason he had safe houses and men like Dante who followed his orders without question. Antonia didn't push. She wasn't sure she was ready for those answers yet. But she found herself looking forward to his visits. Found herself noticing things, the way he moved with such controlled precision, the way his rare smiles transformed his severe face, the way he listened when she talked like her words actually mattered. On the 4th evening, he arrived with something unexpected, a portfolio. What's this? Antonia asked as he set it on the coffee table. Your work. I had someone go to your apartment, with your permission, which I'm asking for retroactively, and collect your art supplies and some personal items. I thought you might want them. Antonia opened the portfolio with shaking hands, saw her sketches and paintings, saw pieces of herself she'd almost forgotten existed. A watercolor of her mother's garden. Charcoal drawings of the city skyline. An oil painting of a woman dancing, free and unbroken. How did you know? She whispered. Maria mentioned you'd asked for paper and pencils. And I remembered you said you teach art. Vincenzo paused. You lit up when you talked about it. Like it was the part of you he couldn't touch. Tears spilled down Antonia's cheeks before she could stop them. Not sad tears, grateful ones. Overwhelmed ones. Thank you, she managed. For this. For everything. For answering a wrong number from a stranger and, her voice broke. And caring what happened next. Vincenzo moved from his chair to sit beside her on the couch, close enough that she could feel his warmth, far enough to maintain propriety. Antonia, look at me. She did, meeting those impossibly dark eyes. You're not a stranger anymore, he said quietly. And what happened to you matters. You matter. Do you understand that? I'm starting to, she whispered. Something shifted in the air between them, awareness, attraction, the recognition that whatever this was, it had moved beyond rescuer and rescued into something more complicated. Vincenzo reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was feather-light, achingly tender from a man who didn't look capable of tenderness. You should rest, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Tomorrow we'll talk about what you want to do next. Where you want to go. How to move forward. But he didn't move, and neither did she, and for a long moment they just sat there in the warm lamplight, close enough to cross a line neither of them was quite ready to cross yet. On the morning of the 5th day, Antonia woke to the sound of shouting downstairs. She sat up quickly, her broken arm aching in protest, heart hammering as old instincts kicked in. Shouting meant danger. Shouting meant someone was angry. Shouting meant. But then she recognized Vincenzo's voice, controlled even in anger, and her panic eased slightly. She grabbed a robe with her good hand and crept to the top of the stairs. Absolutely unacceptable, Vincenzo was saying. I gave explicit instructions that he was to be monitored, not engaged. Boss, he was at her school. That was Dante, sounding defensive. Asking the principal about her, telling people she was mentally unstable, that she'd run away in some kind of episode. He was building a narrative. Antonia's blood ran cold. Derek was at Riverside Charter? Where her students were. Where her colleagues. She descended the stairs before thinking it through, appearing in the living room doorway in her pajamas and borrowed robe. Both men turned to look at her, Vincenzo's expression immediately shifting from anger to concern. Antonia, you should be resting. What did he do? She demanded. What did Derek do at my school? Vincenzo and Dante exchanged looks. Finally, Vincenzo gestured to the couch. Sit down. Please. She did, and he sat beside her, angling his body toward hers like he could shield her from bad news through proximity alone. Derek went to your school yesterday, Vincenzo said carefully. He told your principal that you'd had a mental health crisis, that you'd hurt yourself and run away. He showed up concerned, playing the worried boyfriend. Said he was trying to find you, get you help. That son of a... Antonia's hands clenched into fists. Is trying to ruin my reputation. If the school thinks I'm unstable, if parents hear that I... The principal didn't believe him, Dante interjected. She's known you for 5 years. She told him she'd spoken to you directly, that you were fine, and that he needed to leave the premises immediately. Some of the tension in Antonia's shoulders eased, but not all of it. He's not going to stop, is he? He's going to keep trying to control the narrative, keep trying to hurt me in any way he can. Which is why we need to handle this differently than I originally planned, Vincenzo said, his jaw tight. I was trying to give him a chance to walk away quietly. That was a mistake. The way he said handle this made something twist in Antonia's stomach, not fear exactly, but awareness. She was sitting in a safe house owned by a man who commanded people with military precision, who Derek had folded under like wet paper, who clearly had resources that extended far beyond normal civilian channels. Vincenzo, she said slowly. I need you to tell me the truth. What do you do? Really? He was quiet for a long moment, those dark eyes studying her face like he was calculating how much truth she could handle. Finally, he made a decision. Dante, give us the room. Dante nodded and left without a word, closing the door behind him. Suddenly the spacious living room felt very small, very intimate. Vincenzo turned to face her fully. What do you know about organized crime in this city? Antonia's breath caught. The usual, I guess. What everyone knows. That there are families that control certain businesses, that there's a structure, territories. She trailed off, realization dawning. Oh my God. My family has been part of that structure for 3 generations, Vincenzo said quietly. My grandfather built the foundation, my father expanded the empire, and I inherited it when I was 23 years old. I run the Corleone organization, everything from legitimate businesses to less legitimate ones. I have power in this city. Significant power. You're in the Mafia, Antonia whispered. I prefer to think of it as being in the family business, Vincenzo said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. But yes. That's the truth you're asking for. Antonia should have been terrified. Should have run. Should have called her mother, the police, someone, anyone. But instead, she found herself thinking about the past 5 days. About how safe she'd felt here. About how Vincenzo had treated her with nothing but respect and gentleness. About how he'd answered a wrong number from a stranger because nobody had answered his mother's calls for help. Have you killed people? She asked, surprising herself with the directness of the question. Vincenzo didn't flinch. Yes. Recently. Define recently. In the last year. No. I try to avoid violence when possible now. It's bad for business and worse for the soul. He paused. But I would have killed Derek that first night if you'd asked me to. Without hesitation. Antonia believed him. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I wanted you to know me before you knew what I was. I wanted you to see Vincenzo first, not the Corleone boss. He leaned back, creating distance. And because I knew that once you knew the truth, you'd leave. Everyone does, eventually. It's why I've never. He stopped himself. Never what? Never let anyone get close enough to matter, he finished quietly. It's easier that way. Safer. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in Antonia's chest. Here was this powerful, dangerous man admitting that he was lonely. That he'd built walls so high even he couldn't see over them anymore. I should be scared of you, Antonia said. You should, Vincenzo agreed. I'm not a good man, Antonia. I've done things that would horrify you. I live in a world where violence is currency and loyalty is bought with blood. You deserve better than. Stop, Antonia interrupted. She shifted closer to him, close enough that their knees touched. You came when I called for help. You protected me. You've been nothing but kind to me. Whatever else you are, whatever else you've done, those things are true too. That doesn't erase the rest. No, she agreed. But it matters. You matter. She was echoing his words from days ago, and from the way his eyes darkened, he recognized it. Antonia, he said, her name rough in his mouth. You don't know what you're saying. You're confused, grateful, still recovering from trauma. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 3 years, she countered. I spent 3 years with someone who seemed safe on the surface but was rotten underneath. Maybe I need someone who seems dangerous on the surface but is actually. She searched for the right word. Actually decent underneath it all. Decent, Vincenzo repeated with a bitter laugh. No one's ever called me that before. Well, I am. Antonia reached out with her good hand and did something brave, something that 3 weeks ago would have been impossible. She touched his face, her palm against his cheek. You're a decent man who does bad things sometimes. Derek was a bad man who pretended to do decent things. There's a difference. Vincenzo's hand came up to cover hers, holding it against his face. His eyes closed briefly, like her touch was something he'd been starving for without knowing it. This is a mistake, he said, but he didn't move away. Probably, Antonia agreed. But I've spent 3 years making the safe choices, the ones that made sense on paper. Look where that got me. This is different. I'm different. My world is dangerous. I know. You've said. Antonia leaned closer. But here's what you don't seem to understand, Vincenzo Corleone. For the first time in 3 years, I feel alive. I feel like myself. And that's because of you. The distance between them was down to inches now. Antonia could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could feel his breath on her face. Tell me to stop, Vincenzo whispered. Tell me this is a bad idea and I'll walk away. I'll make sure you're safe, make sure Derek never bothers you again, and then I'll disappear from your life. Just say the word. Antonia thought about it, really thought about it. About the sensible choice, the safe choice. About what her mother would say, what her therapist would say, what any rational person would say about getting involved with a mafia boss 5 days after escaping an abusive relationship. Then she thought about how Vincenzo made her feel. Seen. Valued. Protected but not controlled. How he'd given her space to heal but stayed close enough to catch her if she fell. No, she said firmly. No. His eyebrows rose. No, I won't tell you to stop. No, I won't tell you to walk away. She moved her hand from his face to the back of his neck, her fingers threading through his hair. I'm telling you to stay. Something broke in Vincenzo's careful control. His hand came up to cup her face with devastating gentleness, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. This is going to get complicated, he warned. Everything worth having is complicated, Antonia countered. You're still healing. You need time, space, therapy probably. I need you to stop making decisions for me, Antonia interrupted. I've had enough of men telling me what I need. What I need right now is for you to kiss me and stop overthinking this. Vincenzo laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised and genuine. You're incredibly bossy for someone who was terrified 5 days ago. You bring out the best in me, Antonia said with a small smile. Now are you going to kiss me or do I have to do everything myself? Well, when you put it that way. He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. But Antonia didn't change her mind. She met him halfway, her lips finding his in a kiss that started gentle and careful and quickly became something deeper, more urgent. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head for better access. Her good arm wrapped around his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss tasted like coffee and promises, like danger and safety tangled together in ways that shouldn't work but somehow did. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincenzo rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he said quietly. I know, Antonia whispered back. I can't promise you normal. I can't promise you safe. I don't want normal. Normal got me Derek. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I want real. Can you promise me real? Yes, Vincenzo said without hesitation. I can promise you real. Then that's enough. But reality, as Antonia was about to discover, came with complications neither of them had anticipated. 2 hours later, Maria burst into the living room where Antonia and Vincenzo were going through legal options for a restraining order against Derek, her face pale and her hands shaking. Mr. Corleone, you need to see this. Now. She held out her phone, already open to a news website. The headline made Antonia's blood freeze. Local teacher kidnapped by organized crime figure. Boyfriend tells police she's being held against her will. Below it was a photo, her faculty photo from the school website, next to a grainy security camera image that looked like it might be Vincenzo, though it was deliberately unclear. That bastard, Vincenzo breathed, already pulling out his phone. He went to the police. Dante. Dante appeared in seconds, already on his own phone, his expression grim. It's everywhere, boss. Local news, social media. Derek Hutcherson gave an exclusive interview claiming his girlfriend was abducted by a known criminal. He's crying on camera, showing pictures of you two together. Where the hell did he get pictures? He doesn't have pictures of us together, Antonia said. We've never, wait. Her stomach dropped. The hospital. There were security cameras in the parking lot. If he was watching, if he followed us. He's been tracking you, Vincenzo said, his voice dangerously quiet. This whole time, Every move we thought we were making in secret, he's been documenting. Building a case. A case for what? Antonia felt panic rising in her chest. Vincenzo met her eyes, and she saw something she'd never seen before in his face, genuine worry. For getting you back, he said. And for destroying me in the process. The television in the corner was on now, Maria having turned it on with shaking hands. A reporter stood outside the police station, microphone in hand. Police confirmed they're investigating allegations that elementary school teacher Antonia Bradford was taken by force by Vincenzo Corleone, a man with alleged ties to organized crime. Ms. Bradford's boyfriend, Derek Hutcherson, claims she sent him distressing messages before disappearing 5 days ago. His pleading for her safe return. Then Derek's face filled the screen, and Antonia felt bile rise in her throat. He looked devastated, looked genuine, Oscar-worthy performance of the concerned boyfriend. Tears streaming down his face, voice breaking as he spoke. I just want Antonia to know that I love her, that I'm sorry for whatever argument we had that night. None of it matters now. I just want her home safe. Please, whoever has her, please let her go. She's not part of your world. She's innocent. His voice broke convincingly. She's everything to me. That son of a bitch, Antonia whispered. He broke my arm. He terrorized me for 3 years. And now he's on TV playing the victim. It's smart, Vincenzo said grimly. Diabolically smart. He can't get to you directly, so he's using the law, public opinion, the media. He's painting himself as the hero and me as the villain. And the worst part. What? Antonia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. He's not entirely wrong. I am a criminal. I did take you from your apartment. And I am keeping you at an undisclosed location. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. On paper, it looks exactly like what he's claiming. But I came willingly. You saved me. I know that. You know that. But how do we prove it? Vincenzo was pacing now, his mind clearly racing through scenarios. Your message went to my phone, not your mother's. That actually supports his story, that you were confused, hurt, not thinking clearly. The hospital has record of your broken arm, but you didn't file a police report. No arrest was made. And now you've been staying at my property for 5 days with no contact with your family or friends. I called my mother. From a burner phone I provided, Vincenzo said. This is bad, Antonia. This is really bad. Dante was watching the TV with increasing concern. Boss, they are showing the safe house address. Somehow they got the address. We need to move her. Now. How? Vincenzo demanded. Every camera in the city will be looking for us. Every cop. This has gone public in the worst possible way. Antonia felt the walls closing in again, felt the familiar suffocation of Derek's control reaching out even from a distance. He was still manipulating the narrative, still making her the victim of her own life story. But this time, she wasn't powerless. I need to make a statement, she said suddenly. Both men turned to look at her. I need to go public. Tell my side. Absolutely not, Vincenzo said immediately. That puts you directly in the spotlight, makes you vulnerable. I'm already vulnerable. Antonia shot back. He's already telling my story, Vincenzo. The only question is whether I let him tell it alone or whether I tell the truth. The truth is complicated, Dante said carefully. The truth involves you choosing to stay with a known criminal. The truth is that a known criminal treated me better in 5 days than my boyfriend treated me in 3 years. Antonia's voice rose with emotion. The truth is that I sent that message to the wrong number and it saved my life. The truth is that Derek Hutcherson is an abuser who's manipulating the media the same way he manipulated me. She turned to Vincenzo, her eyes blazing. You told me you'd give me real. You promised me real. Well, this is real. Me, choosing you. Me, choosing to fight back. Me, refusing to let Derek control the narrative anymore. Vincenzo stared at her for a long moment, and Antonia could see the war playing out in his expression, his instinct to protect her battling with his respect for her autonomy. Finally, he nodded. Okay. We do this your way. But we do it smart, and we do it with protection. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number. Tony? It's Vincenzo. I need a favor. A big one. Antonia didn't know who Tony was, but from the way Vincenzo's expression shifted, some of the tension easing, it was someone who could help. Yeah, it's about the news story. I need a press conference, legitimate, with lawyers present. And I need it today. Pause. I don't care what it costs. This is important. Another pause, then a small smile. Thanks. I owe you one. He hung up and looked at Antonia. Tony Marco, he's a defense attorney, one of the best in the city. He's also an old family friend. He'll represent both of us, help us navigate this legally. But Antonia, you need to understand something. He crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. Once you do this, once you publicly align yourself with me, there's no going back. Your reputation will be tied to mine. Your life will be scrutinized. People will judge you for choosing someone like me. Are you sure? Antonia thought about the woman she'd been 5 days ago, terrified, broken, trapped. Thought about the woman she was becoming, strong, clear-eyed, free. I've never been more sure of anything, she said. Vincenzo pulled her close, careful of her broken arm, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Then we do this together. Together, Antonia echoed. But as they prepared for what would be the fight of their lives, neither of them saw the news alert that had just popped up on Dante's phone. Breaking, Derek Hutcherson files for emergency custody claim, says Bradford is mentally unfit, produces medical records from previous incidents. The game had just gotten infinitely more complicated. And Derek was playing for keeps. The press conference was scheduled for 6 p.m. at Tony Marco's downtown law office. That gave them 4 hours to prepare, 4 hours to craft a narrative that could compete with Derek's carefully constructed lies, 4 hours to somehow make the truth sound believable when it involved wrong numbers and mafia bosses and love that shouldn't exist but did anyway. Antonia sat in Tony's conference room, staring at the documents Dante had compiled. Medical records Derek had somehow obtained, records from the ER visit after the kitchen counter incident, after she'd slipped and hit her head. Records from a therapy session 2 years ago where she'd mentioned feeling anxious and confused about her relationship. Even a statement from a former colleague who'd witnessed one of Antonia's panic attacks and described her as emotionally unstable. How did he get all of this? Antonia whispered, feeling violated in a way that went deeper than physical pain. He's been planning this for weeks, maybe months, Tony said. He was a sharp-eyed man in his 60s with silver hair and a reputation for winning impossible cases. This level of documentation, the media coordination, the legal filings, this is someone who knew he was losing control and decided to burn everything down rather than let you go. Can we fight it? Vincenzo asked from where he stood by the window, his body radiating tension. We can try, Tony said carefully. But I'll be honest with you both, this is bad. Derek's painted himself as the victim and you, Mr. Corleone, as the predator. And Antonia. He paused, sympathy in his eyes. He's making you look like someone too damaged to know what's real. The broken arm, the isolation, the fact that you went willingly with a known criminal, he's framing it as Stockholm Syndrome, as trauma bonding. That's not what this is, Antonia said fiercely. I know that. You know that. But convincing a judge, the media, the public. Tony shook his head. That's going to be an uphill battle. The door opened and Maria rushed in, her phone in hand. You need to see this. Now. She turned her phone to show a video that was going viral. Derek being interviewed by a sympathetic reporter, flanked by 2 women Antonia recognized with a sinking heart. Sarah and Jessica. Her old friends, the ones Derek had isolated her from. We're just so worried about Antonia, Sarah was saying, tears in her eyes. She hasn't been herself for years. We tried to stay close, but she pushed us away. We think he was manipulating her even then. He, the reporter prompted. This Corleone person, Jessica supplied. We looked into it. Antonia's family has distant connections to organized crime through her father's side. Maybe that's how they met. Maybe he's been grooming her for years. Antonia felt like she'd been punched. That's insane. My father's cousin was a low-level accountant who did some questionable work 40 years ago. And I haven't seen Sarah or Jessica in 2 years because Derek made it impossible to maintain those friendships. Doesn't matter, Tony said grimly. The narrative is set. You're the damaged victim. Derek's the concerned boyfriend. Vincenzo's the villain. And now they're suggesting this was all premeditated, that Vincenzo targeted you specifically. So what do we do? Vincenzo's voice was dangerously quiet. We tell the truth, Tony said. We show the messages, we show the timeline, we present the hospital records that prove Derek's abuse. We put Antonia on camera and let her tell her story. And if they don't believe her? Vincenzo asked. Tony met his eyes squarely. Then you need to decide how far you're willing to go to protect her. Because Derek's not just trying to get her back, he's trying to destroy both of you. At 5:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the press conference, Antonia stood in Tony's private office, staring at her reflection. She'd borrowed clothes from Maria, a simple blue dress that looked professional, credible. Her broken arm was in its cast, visible evidence of Derek's violence. But would it be enough? Vincenzo entered without knocking, closing the door behind him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I can make you disappear. New identity, new city, new life. Derek would never find you. That's running, Antonia said. I'm done running. Running kept you alive. Surviving isn't living, Vincenzo. You taught me that. She crossed to him, her good hand finding his. Whatever happens out there, I want you to know something. These last 5 days? They've been the most alive I've felt in years. Maybe in my entire life. And I don't regret a single second of it. Vincenzo's jaw tightened with emotion. Antonia, if this goes wrong, if they come after you legally, if Derek somehow wins. Then we deal with it. Together. Like you promised. He pulled her close, careful of her arm, and kissed her with an intensity that felt like desperation and devotion tangled together. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I'm not a good man, he whispered. But with you, I want to be better. You already are, Antonia said. You just don't see it yet. A knock on the door, Tony's assistant. 2 minutes, Mr. Di Marco says. This was it. The moment that would define everything that came next. Vincenzo straightened his tie, his expression shifting into something harder, more controlled, the face he showed the world. But when he looked at Antonia, his eyes were soft. Whatever happens, I've got you, he said. I know, Antonia replied. That's why I'm not scared. The conference room was packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Antonia sat at the table between Vincenzo and Tony, the lights blindingly bright, microphones pointed at her like weapons. Tony spoke first, laying out the facts in clear, legal language. The wrong number. The immediate response. Derek's history of abuse. The broken arm. The messages that proved Antonia had gone willingly. Then it was Antonia's turn. She looked directly into the cameras and told her story. Every painful detail. 3 years of escalating abuse. The isolation from friends and family. The night Derek pushed her down the stairs. The desperate message to the wrong number. The stranger who came anyway. I know how this looks, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I know it seems impossible that I'd trust a stranger over calling the police. But when you've spent 3 years having the police called on you by your abuser, when they always believe him because he's charming and you're the one with bruises you can't explain, you stop trusting the system. She held up her casted arm. Derek Hutcherson did this to me. Not because I fell. Not because I'm clumsy. Because I told him I wanted to leave, and he decided that if he couldn't have me, he'd break me. A reporter shouted a question. Why didn't you call your family? Why go with Mr. Corleone? Because Vincenzo answered when I called for help, Antonia said simply. He came when nobody else would. He protected me when I had no one else. And yes, I know who he is. I know what he does. But I also know that he's treated me with more respect in 5 days than Derek showed me in 3 years. Are you in a relationship with Mr. Corleone? Another reporter called out. Antonia glanced at Vincenzo, who gave her the slightest nod. Your choice, his eyes said. Yes, she said clearly. I am. And that's my choice. Not Derek's. Not the media's. Mine. The room exploded with questions, but Tony held up his hand. That's all for today. Ms. Bradford will not be taking additional questions. However, we will be filing a restraining order against Derek Hutcherson and pursuing criminal charges for assault and stalking. Thank you. As they stood to leave, pushing through the crowd of reporters, Antonia felt Vincenzo's hand at the small of her back, steady, protective, real. They'd done it. Told the truth. Now they'd have to live with whatever consequences came next. But the consequences came faster than anyone expected. They were in the car, Paolo driving them back to a different safe house, when Dante's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went pale. Boss, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Vincenzo asked, already on alert. Derek Hutcherson just walked into the 5th precinct and filed an official missing persons report. Claims Antonia's being held against her will, that the press conference was coerced, and that she needs psychiatric evaluation. Dante paused. There's a warrant out for your arrest, boss. Kidnapping charges. The car went silent. How long do we have? Vincenzo asked, his voice eerily calm. Hours, maybe. They're moving fast because of the media attention. And boss. Dante hesitated. There's more. Derek's claiming he has proof that Antonia messaged him after she left, begging him to save her from you. Screenshots, time-stamped. That's impossible, Antonia breathed. I blocked his number, I didn't. He faked them, Vincenzo said flatly. Good fakes, probably. But fakes nonetheless. He looked at Tony, who was also in the car. Can we fight this? Tony was already on his phone, pulling up legal documents. The warrant is legitimate. If you don't turn yourself in, they'll come looking. And if they find you with Antonia. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Vincenzo's hand found Antonia's, squeezing tightly. Then I turn myself in. No. Antonia's voice broke. Vincenzo, no. You can't. I can and I will, he said, turning to face her. Because if I don't, they'll use it as proof that I'm dangerous, that you're not safe with me. I go in voluntarily, cooperate fully, and we trust the legal system to see the truth. Since when do you trust the legal system? Antonia demanded, panic rising in her chest. Since it became the only way to protect you, Vincenzo said softly. He cupped her face in his hands. Listen to me. This isn't over. This is just Derek's next move in a game he doesn't realize he's already lost. But I need you to be strong for me now. Can you do that? Tears were streaming down Antonia's face. I just found you. I can't lose you now. You won't lose me, Vincenzo promised. I swear to you, Antonia. This is not how our story ends. But as the car pulled up to the police station, as Vincenzo prepared to walk into custody, Antonia felt the darkness closing in around them. Derek had won this round. And she had no idea how they were going to win the next one. Vincenzo spent 3 nights in jail before Tony could arrange bail. 3 nights that felt like 3 years to Antonia, who stayed at Maria and Dante's house, pacing the floors, barely eating, jumping every time her phone buzzed with news updates about the Mafia boss and the teacher. The media had turned their story into a circus. Think pieces about trauma bonding. Psychologists analyzing Antonia's clear signs of manipulation. Derek on every news channel, playing the devastated boyfriend so convincingly that even Antonia started doubting her own memories. Had it really been that bad? Was she really making the right choice? Then she'd look at her broken arm, at the medical records, at the messages she'd sent to the wrong number, and she'd remember, yes. It was that bad. And Vincenzo had saved her. On the 4th morning, Maria shook her awake at dawn. Get dressed, Piccola. Mr. Corleone is out. And he has a plan. Antonia found Vincenzo in Dante's study, looking exhausted but determined. The moment he saw her, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. I'm okay, she whispered against his chest. Are you? I am now, he murmured into her hair. Then he pulled back, his hands on her shoulders. Antonia, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you from the beginning. Her heart sank. What? When Derek went to your school, when he started building his narrative, I had my people dig deeper into his background. And we found something. Vincenzo's expression was grim. He's done this before. Not just the restraining orders, there was another woman, 6 years ago. Emily Travers. She filed charges against him for assault, had evidence, witnesses, everything. What happened to her? Antonia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. The charges were dropped. Derek's family has money, old money, connected money. They buried the case, paid off witnesses, made Emily look unstable. She moved to Oregon, changed her name, never spoke about it again. Vincenzo's jaw tightened. Until now. He pulled out his phone and showed Antonia an email. She saw you on the news. She reached out. She wants to testify, wants to tell her story. With both of you together, with documented patterns of abuse spanning years, Derek's narrative falls apart. Hope flickered in Antonia's chest. Will she really do it? Testify publicly? She's already on a plane. Gets here this afternoon. Vincenzo's eyes were intense. But Antonia, there's something else. Something bigger. He gestured to Dante, who opened a laptop on the desk. The screen showed financial records, bank statements, transaction histories. While I was in jail, Dante did what Dante does best, Vincenzo continued. He followed the money. Derek's money. And guess where a significant portion of it comes from? Antonia shook her head, confused. Derek's been embezzling from his real estate firm for 2 years. Nearly $500,000, funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts. He's been living beyond his means, gambling, losing big. And when his bosses started getting suspicious 3 months ago, he needed a distraction. Something big enough to bury the investigation. Understanding dawned. Me. He needed me to be the story. Exactly, Vincenzo said. The concerned boyfriend whose girlfriend was kidnapped by the Mafia? That's front-page news. That's the kind of story that makes financial investigations disappear into the background noise. So this whole thing, the press conference, the fake screenshots, all of it, it wasn't really about getting me back, Antonia said slowly. It was about covering his own crimes. Partially, Vincenzo agreed. I think he does want you back, in his own twisted way. But mostly, he needed you to be the victim and me to be the villain so badly that nobody would look too closely at his financial records. How do we prove it? Antonia asked. We already have, Dante said, speaking up for the first time. Copies of everything, all documented. We sent it anonymously to the SEC, the FBI, and Derek's firm this morning. By noon today, Derek Hutcherson is going to have much bigger problems than a restraining order. Antonia felt something shift inside her, the weight she'd been carrying for 3 years finally starting to lift. He's going down. He's going down, Vincenzo confirmed. But Antonia, you need to understand something. Once this goes public, once Emily testifies and the financial crimes come to light, there's going to be scrutiny on how we obtained this information. Questions about my involvement. It could get complicated. I don't care, Antonia said firmly. Let them ask questions. Let them scrutinize. We did nothing wrong. Technically, I did several illegal things to get this evidence, Vincenzo said with a slight smile. But I appreciate the sentiment. Tony burst into the study, his phone pressed to his ear, a grin spreading across his usually serious face. Turn on the news. Channel 7. Now. Dante grabbed the remote, and suddenly the screen was filled with Derek's face. But not the sympathetic, tear-stained version from the past few days. This was Derek being led out of his office building in handcuffs, FBI agents on either side of him, reporters swarming. Derek Hutcherson, 32, was arrested this morning on charges of embezzlement, wire fraud, and falsifying financial documents, the reporter was saying. Sources say the investigation has been ongoing for months, but new evidence came to light that accelerated the arrest. Hutcherson's attorney had no comment, but this development raises serious questions about his recent claims regarding his girlfriend, Antonia Bradford. The scene cut to Emily Travers, a woman in her mid-30s with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw, standing outside a police station. I'm here to tell my story, Emily was saying. Derek Hutcherson abused me 6 years ago. He broke my ribs, gave me a concussion, and then used his family's money and connections to make me look crazy when I tried to press charges. When I saw Antonia Bradford on the news, Saw him doing the same thing to her that he did to me. I knew I had to speak up. I won't be silent anymore. And I won't let him destroy another woman's life. Antonia felt tears streaming down her face, not sad tears, but something else. Relief. Vindication. Hope. Vincenzo's arms came around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. It's over, he said softly. He can't hurt you anymore. We did it, Antonia whispered. We actually did it. No, Vincenzo corrected gently. You did it. You were brave enough to ask for help. Brave enough to tell your story. Brave enough to fight back when anyone else would have given up. She turned in his arms to face him. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Wrong number, right timing, he said with a small smile. Best wrong number I ever sent, Antonia agreed. Tony cleared his throat. Hate to interrupt this moment, but we need to move fast. The prosecutor wants to meet with Antonia this afternoon. With Emily's testimony and the financial evidence, they are willing to drop all charges against Vincenzo and pursue Derek on multiple counts of assault, harassment, fraud, basically everything we've got. But we need to strike while the media momentum is in our favor. Then let's do it, Antonia said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Let's finish this. That afternoon, Antonia sat in the prosecutor's office and told her story again, but this time, people believed her. This time, there was evidence, corroboration, a pattern that couldn't be denied. Emily sat beside her, and together they painted a picture of Derek Hutcherson that finally matched reality. A dangerous, manipulative man who'd been hiding behind charm and family money for too long. By evening, the charges against Vincenzo were formally dropped. By the next morning, Derek's bail was denied. Flight risk, the judge said, given his offshore accounts and history of manipulation. It was over. Really, truly over. A week later, Antonia stood in her apartment, the one she'd once shared with Derek, but that now felt different. Cleaner. Lighter. Hers again. Vincenzo had offered to hire movers to pack up Derek's remaining belongings, but Antonia had insisted on doing it herself. Not out of sentiment, but out of closure. She needed to physically remove him from her space, needed to reclaim every corner he'd tainted. She was boxing up the last of his clothes when her phone rang. An unknown number. For a split second, fear spiked, old habits dying hard. Then she remembered. Derek was in jail. Derek couldn't hurt her anymore. She answered. Hello. Ms. Bradford? This is Principal Morrison from Riverside Charter. Antonia's heart sank. She'd been on leave since everything happened, hadn't spoken to her principal since before the press conference. Was she being fired? After everything, was she going to lose her job too? I wanted to call personally to let you know that the school board met this morning, Principal Morrison continued. We've reviewed everything, your statement, Emily Travers' testimony, the charges against Mr. Hutcherson. And Ms. Bradford, I want to apologize. Apologize? Antonia repeated, confused. We should have seen the signs. Should have asked more questions when you became withdrawn, when you stopped participating in faculty events. Should have noticed that you were hurting. The principal's voice was heavy with regret. But we didn't. And for that, I'm truly sorry. Tears pricked Antonia's eyes. Thank you. That means more than you know. Would like you to come back. Whenever you're ready. Your students have been asking about you. They miss their art teacher. A pause. We all do. After she hung up, Antonia sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and felt something she hadn't felt in years, peace. Real, genuine peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vincenzo. Dinner tonight? Want to show you something. She smiled and typed back, can't wait. The turning point had come. The darkness was lifting. And for the first time in 3 years, Antonia could see light ahead. Real light. Real hope. Real life. 3 months later, Antonia stood in front of her elementary school class, her cast finally removed, demonstrating how to blend watercolors to create the perfect sunset. 20 pairs of young eyes watched her every move, and for the first time in years, she felt completely present. Completely herself. Ms. Bradford, is it true you were on TV? Asked little Mia Chen, 8 years old with pigtails and endless curiosity. Antonia smiled gently. I was. Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult things, and talking about them helps other people who might be going through the same things. Were you scared? Another student asked. Very scared, Antonia admitted honestly. But I learned that being scared and being brave aren't opposites. Sometimes you have to be both at the same time. The lesson continued, and as Antonia moved through the classroom, helping students with their paintings, she felt the weight of the past 3 years finally lifting completely. The trial had concluded last week. Derek sentenced to 8 years for embezzlement, fraud, and assault charges from both her and Emily. The judge had been scathing in her remarks, calling Derek a danger to society who preys on vulnerable women. Emily had hugged Antonia outside the courtroom, both women crying tears of relief. We did it, Emily had whispered. We stopped him. And they had. Together, they'd broken the cycle. Now, as school ended and students filed out, Antonia cleaned up the art supplies and found herself humming. Actually humming. When had she last done that? Her phone buzzed, outside. Don't look too professional, it intimidates me. Antonia laughed and grabbed her bag. Vincenzo had been respecting her space, letting her heal and reclaim her independence. They'd been taking things slowly, dinners, walks, long conversations that stretched into the night. Learning each other properly, without crisis driving every interaction. But she was ready for more now. Ready to really begin. Vincenzo leaned against his Mercedes, a different one than that first night, something lower key that didn't scream criminal empire, and watched Antonia emerge from the school building. She wore a yellow sundress, the kind she'd stopped wearing years ago, and her hair was down, catching the late afternoon sun. She was beautiful. But more than that, she was whole again. Or getting there. Hey, she said, reaching him with a smile that made his chest tight. Hey yourself, he replied, opening the car door for her. Ready for your surprise? You know I hate surprises, Antonia said, but she was grinning as she slid into the passenger seat. You'll like this one. Trust me. They drove through the city as rush hour began, Vincenzo navigating traffic with ease while Antonia told him about her day, about Mia's question, about the new mural project the school had approved for her to lead. The principal said it's about healing through art, Antonia explained. The kids are going to design it together, something that represents hope and community. I think it'll be beautiful. It will be, Vincenzo agreed. Because you're leading it. They pulled up to a building in the arts district, old brick converted into loft spaces, galleries on the ground floor. Vincenzo parked and came around to open her door, offering his hand. Where are we? Antonia asked as he led her to a side entrance. You'll see. He keyed in a code and the door opened to a stairwell. They climbed to the 3rd floor, and Vincenzo produced a key, actual key, not electronic, and opened the door to a loft space. Antonia gasped. The entire loft was flooded with natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was open, airy, with exposed brick and hardwood floors. But what made her breath catch was the art studio set up in the corner, professional easels, a full range of paints and supplies, storage for canvases, everything she'd ever dreamed of having. What is this? She whispered. It's yours, Vincenzo said quietly. If you want it. No strings, no obligations. Just a space for you to create, to be yourself. The lease is paid for 2 years, and if you decide you want it after that, we can renegotiate. Antonia walked through the space slowly, touching the easels, the brushes, running her fingers over the blank canvases waiting to be filled. Vincenzo, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not enough, he countered. You lost 3 years of your life, 3 years of creating, because of him. I can't give you those years back. But I can give you space to make up for lost time. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. Why? Why do you keep doing things like this? Vincenzo crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands, thumbs wiping away her tears. Because when you're happy, when you're creating, when you're fully yourself, you light up the entire room. And I've spent most of my life in darkness, Antonia. But with you. He smiled softly. With you, everything's brighter. I love you, Antonia said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, I know we're still figuring this out, but I love you, Vincenzo Corleone. I love you. For a moment, Vincenzo just stared at her, something vulnerable and awed in his expression. Then he kissed her, deep, passionate, full of everything words couldn't express. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you too. I've loved you since that first night, when you opened the door terrified and broken and still brave enough to trust a stranger. You changed my life, Antonia. You made me want to be better. You are better, she said firmly. You just needed someone to see it. They stood there in the sunlit loft, holding each other, and Antonia felt the final pieces of her broken heart clicking back into place, not the same as before, but stronger for having been shattered and rebuilt. So about this loft, Vincenzo said after a while, pulling back slightly. There's a bedroom upstairs. Fully furnished. I was thinking. You were thinking what? Antonia asked, a smile playing at her lips. That maybe you'd want to move in. Not with me, I have my own place. But here, where you'd have space and light and freedom. Where you could start fresh. Antonia looked around the loft again, imagining mornings painting by the windows, evenings hosting friends, nights falling asleep in a space that was entirely hers. No ghosts. No fear. Just possibility. Yes, she said. Yes, I want it. I want all of it. 2 weeks later, Antonia hosted her first gathering in the loft. Her mother had driven up from Richmond, along with her aunt and uncle. Sarah and Jessica were there, real apologies exchanged, friendships tentatively rebuilding. Emily had flown in from Oregon, bringing her new boyfriend who looked at her like she was precious. Even Principal Morrison had stopped by with wine and well wishes. And Vincenzo was there, of course, looking slightly uncomfortable in casual clothes among civilians but trying his best. Maria had come too, bringing enough food to feed an army, fussing over everyone like a mother hen. This is nice, Emily said, finding Antonia on the small balcony as the sun set over the city. You look happy. I am, Antonia said, surprised to find it completely true. For the first time in years, I actually am. He's good for you, Emily observed, nodding toward where Vincenzo was attempting to make small talk with Antonia's mother. Terrifying, probably dangerous, definitely not who anyone would have picked for you on paper. But good for you. Antonia laughed. Yeah. He really is. You know what's funny? Emily said. We both sent messages. You sent yours to the wrong number and found salvation. I sent mine to the right numbers, the police, my family, friends, and got nothing. Makes you wonder about fate. Maybe fate has a sense of humor, Antonia said, echoing words Vincenzo had once spoken to her. Or maybe, Emily said thoughtfully, the universe just knew you needed someone who'd actually answer. Inside, someone called for a toast. Antonia's mother stood with a glass of wine, her eyes shining with tears. To my daughter, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Who survived what should have broken her. Who found strength in the darkest places. Who proved that sometimes the wrong number is exactly the right one. To Antonia, may your future be as bright as your heart. To Antonia, everyone echoed. Vincenzo's eyes found hers across the room, and the look he gave her was full of promise, protection, and something that looked a lot like forever. Later, after everyone had gone home and the loft was quiet, Antonia and Vincenzo stood at the windows, watching the city lights sparkle below. Thank you, she said quietly. For answering. For coming. For everything. Thank you for sending the message, Vincenzo replied. For trusting me. For seeing past what I am to who I want to be. Who you already are, Antonia corrected. She pulled out her phone and opened her messages, scrolling to that first conversation, the wrong number that had saved her life. She read the words again. Mom, please. He broke my arm. I'm scared. He's getting worse. I don't know what to do. And below it, address. Now. 2 words that had changed everything. I should probably fix this in my contacts, Antonia said with a smile. Stop calling you Mom. Vincenzo laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and genuine. I don't know. It's kind of grown on me. Very confusing for anyone who tries to hack your phone. Antonia changed the contact name to Vincenzo Red Heart Hash, and held up the phone to show him. Better. Perfect, he said, pulling her close. Everything's perfect. And standing there in her loft, in her space, in her new life, with a man who'd crossed the city because a stranger needed help. Antonia finally believed it. Everything really was perfect. Or at least, it was perfectly hers. The morning light filtered through the loft windows, painting everything gold. Antonia stood at her easel, brush in hand, working on a piece that had consumed her for the past week. It was different from anything she'd created before, bolder, more vibrant, infused with emotion she'd kept locked away for too long. The painting showed two hands reaching for each other across a dark space, light emanating from where they touched. It was abstract, symbolic, but to Antonia it represented everything. The message sent into darkness, the answer that came back, the connection that saved her. "That's beautiful," Vincenzo's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him come in, but she'd given him a key weeks ago. The gesture had meant something to both of them: trust, commitment, the willingness to be vulnerable. "It's us," Antonia said simply, setting down her brush. "That first night. Me reaching out blindly, you answering." Vincenzo moved closer, studying the painting with the serious attention he gave to everything that mattered to him. "You've captured something there. Something I don't have words for." "That's why I paint it instead," Antonia said with a smile. She wiped her hands on a cloth and turned to face him fully. "What brings you by this morning? I thought you had that meeting with the Port Authority." "I did. It finished early." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "And I wanted to give you this." Antonia took it, curious. Inside was a legal document, pages of dense text that took her a moment to parse. When she understood what she was reading, her breath caught. "This is the deed to the loft," she said slowly. "Vincenzo, what?" "It's yours," he interrupted gently. "Completely, legally yours. Not leased, owned. I had it transferred into your name this morning." "I can't accept this," Antonia protested, even as her heart swelled. "This is too much. The lease was already generous, but owning it outright." "Antonia." Vincenzo took both her hands in his. "You need to understand something. My whole life, I've used money and power as weapons, as tools for control. But with you, I want to use them differently. I want to give you security, freedom, the ability to create without worrying about rent or leases or anything else. Let me do this. Let me give you something good." Tears welled in Antonia's eyes. "You've already given me so much. You gave me my life back." "No," Vincenzo said firmly. "You took your life back. You were brave enough to ask for help, strong enough to fight for yourself, courageous enough to tell your story. All I did was answer the phone." "You did more than that and you know it," Antonia said, her voice thick with emotion. "You protected me. You believed me. You helped me see that I was worth saving." "You were always worth saving," Vincenzo said, pulling her close. "I just helped you remember." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the sunlight, two broken people who'd somehow found a way to be whole together. Finally, Antonia pulled back slightly. "I want to show you something. Come with me." She led him upstairs to the bedroom, to the small desk she'd set up by the window. On it sat a journal, leather-bound, well-worn, filled with her handwriting. "I've been writing," she explained. "Everything that happened. From the first night Derek hurt me to the moment I sent that message to the wrong number to now. My therapist suggested it might help with processing the trauma." "Has it helped?" Vincenzo asked gently. "Yes. But it's also become something else." Antonia opened the journal to a page near the end. "I want to publish it. Not for money or fame, but because somewhere out there, there's another woman locked in a bathroom, terrified, thinking she has no way out. And I want her to know that help can come from the most unexpected places. That wrong numbers can be right. That she's not alone." Vincenzo read the page she'd opened to, his expression unreadable. When he looked up, there was moisture in his eyes. "This is powerful, Antonia. Raw and honest and exactly what people need to hear." He paused. "But you know what publishing this means, don't you? More scrutiny, more questions about us, about me. The media will dig again." "I know," Antonia said. "And I don't care. Let them dig. Let them ask questions. We have nothing to hide. I love you, you love me, and we found each other in the strangest possible way. That's our story, and I'm not ashamed of any of it." Vincenzo cupped her face in his hands, looking at her with such intensity it made her breath catch. Do you have any idea how extraordinary you are? I'm learning, Antonia said with a small smile. You're a pretty good teacher. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he kept his forehead pressed to hers. I have something I need to tell you too, Vincenzo said quietly. Something I've been thinking about for a while now. What is it? Antonia asked, her heart picking up speed. I'm stepping back from the business. Not completely, that's not really possible in my world. But I'm delegating more, legitimizing what I can, and distancing myself from the darker aspects. He took a breath. Because I want a life that's worthy of you. A life where I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder, where the woman I love doesn't have to worry about what I'm doing or who I'm meeting with. Vincenzo, you don't have to change for me. I'm not changing for you, he interrupted. I'm changing because of you. There's a difference. You made me want to be better, want to build something good instead of just protecting what's mine through force. You made me remember that there's more to life than power and control. Antonia felt tears streaming down her face again. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. Good, Vincenzo said with a slight smile. I'd hate to be the only one terrified. That evening, Antonia's mother called. They'd been talking regularly now, rebuilding the relationship that Derek had systematically tried to destroy. How are you, sweetheart? Her mother asked, her voice warm. I'm good, Mom. Really good. Antonia curled up on the couch, phone to her ear, feeling 17 again in the best possible way. I finished the painting I was telling you about. The one about that night. Yeah. I think it's the best thing I've ever created. I'd love to see it. Maybe I could come visit next weekend? I know you're busy with school and everything, but... I'd love that, Antonia said warmly. You can meet Vincenzo properly this time. Not at a party with 100 other people, but just dinner. The three of us. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure? I don't want to intrude. Mom, you're not intruding. You're my mother. And Vincenzo is. Antonia searched for the right words. He's my future. I want the two most important people in my life to know each other. Your future, her mother repeated softly. That sounds serious. It is serious, Antonia confirmed. More serious than I've ever been about anything. Then I'll be there, her mother promised. And Antonia, I'm so proud of you. For leaving, for fighting back, for choosing happiness. You're the strongest person I know. After they hung up, Antonia sat in the quiet loft, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment. The pain, the fear, the desperate message to a wrong number. The stranger who came anyway. The slow rebuilding of her life, piece by piece. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to her message history with Vincenzo, all the way back to that first conversation. She read it again, marveling at how one mistake, 2 transposed digits, had changed the trajectory of her entire life. Then she typed a new message, "Thank you for answering." His response came immediately, "Thank you for calling." Antonia walked to the windows, looking out at the city spread below her. Somewhere out there, another woman might be locked in a bathroom, terrified and alone. Somewhere out there, someone might be sending a desperate message, hoping for help. She hoped they'd find their Vincenzo. Their unexpected answer. Their wrong number that turned out right. But she also knew that salvation didn't always come from outside. Sometimes it came from within, from the moment you decided you were worth saving, from the courage to ask for help, from the strength to fight for yourself even when the world told you to stay quiet and accept your fate. Derek was in prison. Emily was healing in Oregon. Sarah and Jessica were back in her life. Her mother knew the truth. Her students were creating beautiful art. And Vincenzo, dangerous, powerful, unexpected Vincenzo, loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away. Behind her, she heard the door open, heard his familiar footsteps. She didn't turn around, just smiled as his arms came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured against her hair. "Wrong numbers," Antonia said. "And how sometimes the universe knows exactly what it's doing." "I don't believe in the universe having a plan," Vincenzo said. "But I believe in choices. You chose to send that message. I chose to answer. We chose each other. Best choice I ever made, Antonia said, turning in his arms to face him. Second best, Vincenzo corrected with a slight smile. The best choice you made was leaving him in the first place. Everything else just followed. He was right, Antonia realized. The bravest thing she'd done wasn't trusting Vincenzo or telling her story or facing down Derek in court. The bravest thing she'd done was deciding she deserved better, that she was worth more than fear and pain and broken bones. Everything else had just been the universe, or fate, or chance, or whatever you wanted to call it, saying yes, you're right, you do deserve better, and here's someone who sees it too. I love you, Antonia said simply. I love you too, Vincenzo replied. Wrong number and all. They stood together as the sun set over the city, two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, Antonia knew that. There would be challenges, questions, moments when the weight of Vincenzo's world pressed in on them. But they'd face it together. Hand in hand. Wrong number to right person. And really, when Antonia thought about it, that was the most beautiful story of all. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.